Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Body Armor Industry Standards and Compliance Testing, Best Practices, and Future Trends webinar. We are excited to have you with us today and looking forward to spending a little bit of time talking about this incredibly important and awesome subject that we are excited about. A couple quick things. We have a Q&A box as well as a chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to put your questions in the chat and we'll be happy to address them as we can. Quick introduction. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Zach Christensen. I'm the Deputy Chief Cooperative Procurement Officer over RFxPremier. With me today, I have Abby Chittenden. Abby, would you like to quick introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Abby Chittenden. I am one of the cooperative portfolio managers for NASPO ValuePoint, and specifically Body Armor is one of my current portfolios.
Thanks, Abby. We also have Anna Seipel from SEI. Anna, would you like to quick introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Anna Seipel. I'm a program director with SEI, which is the Safety Equipment Institute, and I look forward to sharing some information with you during this webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anna. So the idea for today's webinar originated during a meeting with the Big City Fire Working Group. And there was a conversation about creating multi-agency contracts that would help increase the buying power and raise supplier interest and really help meet those unique fire service needs. And Big City Fire is a working group organized by the Department of Homeland Security and facilitated by DHS National Urban Security Technology Laboratory, so NewSteel. Their membership includes active duty senior fire service leaders representing 12 of the largest fire departments in the US. These leaders work together to share information to better fire service, identify capability needs, give input on enhancements to technology, products, or features, inform publications such as white papers, guides, standards, and requirements. And members of Big City Fire expressed interest in a cooperative contract for firefighter body armor and ballistic helmets. And so NASPO is following up on that request, and we have the webinar today. So we would like to definitely jump in and start talking about this important subject. So our learning objectives for today are to learn about NASPO and the RFxPremier and the different contracting options that we have with these different organizations and how we get contracts in place. We also want you to gain an understanding of the role that standards play and the conformity assessments that we do to make sure that those products meet those standards when we put those different products on contract. We also want you to be aware of the different contract options that we have for these ballistic-resistant body armor and helmets for peace officers as well as for fire departments, and discuss how you can participate with these different contract options. Abby?
Thank you, Zach. If you don't already know, NASPO is the National Association of State Procurement Officials. We were established in 1947 to dispose of surplus property following World War II, and we are currently in our 77th year. Our members are the chief procurement officers of all 50 states, as well as Washington, D.C. and the U.S. territories. We have two branches. One is like an educational arm, and then the other one is our purchasing cooperative, NASPO ValuePoint, which started in 1992. And Zach, if you want to move to the next slide. Thank you. NASPO's mission statement is to promote government excellence by delivering superior procurement solutions for the benefit of the public. NASPO ValuePoint, the purchasing cooperative's mission statement, is to promote innovative and efficient procurement by states, delivering superior value contracts with integrity and transparency for the public sector. NASPO members and our board of directors demonstrate leadership, excellence, and integrity in procurement processes by setting clear goals and establishing programs, policies, procedures, and events that support our values. And what sets NASPO ValuePoint apart? Currently, we have 63 portfolios, one emerging market portfolio, which is the electric vehicle charging stations, 8 new portfolios in the works, and over 600 contracts. We facilitate over $22 billion in annual spend, and we use a lead state model. This lead state model utilizes one state that will host the RFP using its own statutory framework, but they work in conjunction with a multi-state sourcing team. And together they will draft and craft each RFP and help manage the contracts throughout the life of the portfolio. We use this because it meets most statutory and regulatory requirements for competition, which is very important to the public sector. And we also invite other states to join in the drafting and evaluating of this. So even beyond the sourcing team, we allow the chief procurement officers for the states and territories to review the RFP and make sure that they don't have any questions or concerns before it gets posted to the public. Many states utilize the resulting contracts as well as many local entities.
Thanks, Abby. So I'd like to introduce RFxPremier for those of you who have not heard of RFxPremier yet. RFxPremier is a new cooperative organization that NASPO has been the catalyst in creating. As Abby just mentioned, NASPO is the organization that really supports that central state procurement office, and they address the needs that the states have and a lot of the members that will bring forth different requests for contracts and other things. So NASPO has been a great pillar in the procurement community in addressing those needs. However, there's been requests that NASPO hasn't been able to fulfill that meet local needs, cities, counties, higher education. So NASPO has helped create this new organization that really targets these other groups to really help address their needs. So we do focus on these other group needs because NASPO is really focusing on those state needs. So like NASPO ValuePoint, we have methodologies to get contracts in place. We have our lead entity model, which very similar to the lead state, where we have an entity that will own that contract, that will put that together, and we have a multi-entity sourcing team. For example, on a recent contract that we had sourcing team members from a state office, State Board of Education, higher education, a city, and a nonprofit. We try to address the different needs and be able to get their input as we put together these different contracts to make sure that we really help address these needs that haven't quite been addressed in other areas. Oh, Abby, you're not.
I have been muting myself in between. Thank you, Zach. I would have gone through this whole slide without knowing. I'm going to talk a little bit about our NASPO ValuePoint procurement process. Our main goal is to provide best value contracts on a predictable time frame. Our process looks very similar to many public procurement processes, but we start with the pre-solicitation activities, which includes everything from market research to an analysis that we submit to our executive council to take a look at. We make sure during that time that we have the best lead state lined up to take that solicitation forward, as well as a fully formed sourcing team. And then during that time frame, we will also host events such as an industry day, or we might send out an RFI to get more information from the supplier community so that we have best informed ourselves and our sourcing team and lead state. So as they move into phase 1, the solicitation development, they can compile all of that together to create the best RFP that they can to meet as many folks' needs as possible. During that phase 1 is when the RFP is drafted, and that gets released out to our executive council for their review and insight, but also the state directors, those chief procurement officers that I mentioned earlier. They get to take a look at those and tell us if they intend to participate in those. They give us some idea of spend so we can let suppliers know. And we incorporate it all for the public posting, which is phase 2. That will typically have the pre-bid meeting or the pre-proposal conference and that Q&A period. And our RFPs are roughly posted for 40 days. After the responses are due, we have our evaluation and award that we go through with our lead state and the sourcing team. And once that award has been finalized, we have the protest period and handle any protests should they come in before moving into phase 5, which is our master agreement development, which our master agreements are what we call contracts. And so we go into the master agreement development and negotiations. And we utilize the lead state and their legal, as well as NASPO's legal, to get those contracts in place. And then we'll have a supplier kickoff to educate all the suppliers on how to work with states and local entities if they want to sign a participating addendum. And then we'll have the state portfolio kickoff to announce it to the state. Many times we have been having webinars such as this to have that space where we can present all of the changes from the previous solicitation to the current one and what those changes in the contracts are, who the new suppliers are, and how best to work with them. And after that, we have our normal contract administration phase where our supplier engagement team really works with the suppliers to do annual reviews on their contracts in the portfolio. And we continue to work with our lead state to manage the contracts themselves. And did I see a question come through? Why roughly 40 days? Thank you for asking. That has stemmed from one of the longest state requirements that we have been made aware of. So we do that because our goal is to put out contracts that as many states and entities, public entities, are able to utilize. So if we were to post the RFPs for less time, it can cut out certain states that wouldn't be able to use it because it wasn't posted for as long as their statute requires. And we try to stay on top of that annually to see what the state statute requirements and policies and procedures entail so that we can better inform anyone that wants to know. We have that on our NASPO.org website. So who does what under the lead state or lead entity model? The lead state is, again, that individual that has been named and steps out as leading the procurement. And then we have the multi-state sourcing team who comes along and acts as evaluators as well as subject matter experts to help develop that RFP and evaluate it once the responses come in. NASPO also has a team of folks that work with the lead state or the lead entity and the multi-state sourcing team. We have the cooperative portfolio managers, which is myself, cooperative portfolio coordinators, supplier engagement managers, project managers, legal, marketing, partnerships, and many more. Our supplier engagement manager ensures that cutting edge solicitations are in alignment with industry standards and they facilitate competition. Our legal team helps to expedite those contract negotiations, and they do reviews and compliance throughout the process to make sure on the front end and the back end that we are following all the rules that we need to and meeting all the needs that we can. And then our cooperative portfolio managers, as well as our cooperative portfolio coordinators, really provide the procurement expertise for these portfolios from the NASPO perspective to kind of keep that national viewpoint on these solicitations as they're happening. And they also provide that market research and sourcing support. And we've got benefits of cooperative contracts. Typically, we award to multiple suppliers, so we can provide the largest pool of both suppliers and options possible for purchasing entities nationwide. That we also do all of this work to help keep administrative costs low for the purchasing entities, because there's no need for them to do the solicitation themselves. Plus, they're leveraging the buying power of the nation and not just their state or their entity. And I think I already covered the next point, talking about that more favorable pricing, because we are leveraging the entire country. And then we have a greater ability to direct and set industry standards that better align with the buyer's needs.
Fantastic. Thank you, Abby. So as Abby indicated, when we have these different standards that we incorporate into the solicitations, it really is a strong benefit for the buyers. They can really quickly and confidently identify what those goods are that meet those expectations and their different requirements for their entities. And so this definitely reduces that evaluation and research stage so that they can really focus on what their unique needs are and find those products that meet those needs. So as we look at this, by incorporating the minimum standards, buyers are able to really use the contracts as a starting point to help identify what those goods and services are that meet those requirements. Now, while the standards don't really identify the solutions that are out there, they do specify those minimum performance expectations on the contracts and what these products have to be able to do in order to be on that contract. So when the right standards are used, they are a great benefit to help significantly reduce a lot of the risk of liability and civil litigation for these different entities. There's a standard that has already been created, and by implementing that, it really does help resolve that concern down the road. Next, as we see with a lot of cooperative procurement and those benefits that Abby had just mentioned, when we include standards, it really does reduce that effort that it takes and that time that the different procurement units have to invest, and the different money that it requires for those entities to determine what those standards should be, what those performance expectations should be, their performance metrics, and then how to evaluate different products against that standard and how to really determine whether a product meets that expectation or not. Instead, they can increase their productivity by focusing on what the entity's unique needs are and how these products that have already been evaluated meet that. And it really does create a great symbiotic relationship between the buyers, who are able to use these contracts more effectively to identify kind of those potential solutions for those entities. And it does help enhance those responders' performance and confidence that those items really do meet that expectation for safety as we go through this. So in all candor, firearms are one of the most dangerous threats that public safety officers and firefighters face every day. By including standards in our solicitations, buyers are able to help ensure that these officers have safety that they can rely on. As we've been putting this together, I read a story from the NIJ that was really kind of interesting, and I wanted to help just kind of share that, which helped illustrate kind of why we have these standards. A little more than a decade ago, Officer Anna Carzales from the Stafford Police Department in Fort Bend County, Texas, was shot in the face and chest while she was pursuing a subject. Fortunately for Officer Carzales, she had certified body armor on as she was doing her job, and that saved her life. While she was able to pursue the subject and able to return home safely, she was able to do that because she had these products that were off of a contract that had those standards. And it was something that really helps emphasize the importance of why these standards should be included in different contract vehicles. All right, so you'll see here that with the current contract that NASPO ValuePoint has in place, that we issued with the help of the state of Colorado in 2020, the NIJ standards were used heavily and were relied upon to create that performance metric and that performance expectation that the contracts were able to require. Sorry, okay. So you will see that with this, some of these standards go back to the 1980s. However, as this contract was issued, those were the current standards. That was what the expectations are that these products had to meet in order to be able to be on that contract. So I do see that we have Cassie on the call with us. She was an integral part of this process. She was on the RFP team, and she also helped with some of these different standards. Cassie, can you just help share how these standards were chosen to be in the contract, the solicitation, and kind of the impact that they had on the overall RFP and process?
Yeah, thanks, Zach. So you will see by looking at this slide that the standards are old, some of them very old, nearly 30 years old, but they were actually the standards that were available at that time. And even though they're old, especially the stab armor, the helmet, and the shield standards, are pretty old, 20 to 30 years old at that time, but they still ensure a baseline level of acceptable performance. So just because they're old doesn't mean they're bad or there's anything wrong with
Mm-hmm.
them. They still are helping to ensure that body armor and ballistic protection products are fit for purpose and that they do meet a baseline level of acceptable performance. Now, the good news is that the standards have been updated, and you'll hear more about that in a little bit. Thanks.
Thanks, Cassie. Abby, would you like to talk about what's on the current contract?
I would love to, Zach. Thank you. Our current contract has the state of Colorado as our lead state. So we work with them to ensure contract compliance. Our current price list that we have has the following items included on there. We've got the product type, the manufacturer, brand, and series, their catalog number, and then we make them indicate if it's an NIJ CPL model designation or an SCI model designation, the gender of the item, and then specifically state either the NIJ standards or the ASTM standards. We also ask them for the threat level. We have the MSRP on there, the bid price, and the percent discount. I skipped over in red, you will see the ballistic protection warranty period. That is not something that we currently have on our price lists. However, we are able to look that up if there's ever a question about it. And it is included in our new RFP that is currently on the street. So the resulting contracts that come out of that will have that listed in the contract itself, and you won't have to try and navigate the NIJ website or even reach out to the lead state in order to have Amy look that up for you and let you know what that warranty period is.
Thanks, Abby. So I'd like to talk more about some of these different standards and how they can really help with the contracting process. So the current NIJ standards were really built off of the ASTM standards. And the standards had the input and participation from law enforcement, the Department of Justice, and even suppliers. They were all able to weigh in. And this holistic approach has ensured that the standards truly reflect the best practices to provide the best products to our end users. As we mentioned before, threats change and evolve. And so do the products that our peace officers and firefighters use and rely on to face those threats. And this requires that these standards be reviewed and modified as necessary. And you'll see here that some of the NIJ standards, as well as the ASTM standards, were recently updated. These new standards are vital to keep pace with that ever-changing and ever-evolving weapons that our officers face every day. The updated standards reflect the experience of the community and have articulated what these products need to do and how they should be tested in a consistent, replicable and valid manner. This process ensures that our officers have access to information to help pick that best value product that have been designed and tested to withstand those threats and so that they can return home safely every night, like the officer we mentioned before. Now, we mentioned this before, but I think it bears repeating. These standards don't specify a particular solution. Instead, they'd rather define what those solutions must accomplish in order to meet that expectation. So you'll see here we have kind of a little stool here as part of our diagram here, and it's really kind of that three-part process. And the standards are only as effective as they are used by different procurement professionals to purchase these products off of different contracts. So once the standards have been created, there has to be a method to certify that those products meet those standards. And this is where compliance testing comes into effect. Products are tested at independent laboratories like the Safety Equipment Institute. We'll hear from Anna in just a moment. Once products are determined to meet those specifications, this compliant product list is then created and made available. So our procurement professionals can, see and have confidence that those procurement decisions are made with the most current information, knowing that those products are fit for the intended purpose that they are marketed for, and that it gives them information so that they can have that comparison to make sure that those products have been tested effectively and that they can rely on that for performance. So Cassie, we mentioned before that some of these standards have been updated. Can you help share a little bit of information about what has changed on these different standards?
Sure. I'll be happy to explain a little bit about the standards that are listed here. Um, they don't all have dates, but they're all current. The ballistic protection standards are all current as of 23 or 24. So much better than the 1980s and the early 2000s. So let's start with the ballistic resistant body armor standard. It was just published. The new version was just published in 2023, and it has some improvements. I'm only going to touch on like the top 5 that I think are really important. So the ballistic test projectiles were updated to represent current threats faced by law enforcement officers. That NIJ does that on a regular basis to make sure that their standards are still current. The performance levels were renamed just to make more sense to end users and purchasers. So the terms used to be like level 2, level 3A, level 3 and 4. Now they have actually got handgun and rifle in the level titles. So it'll be NIJ handgun 1, NIJ handgun 2, NIJ rifle 1, and so forth. I think that's a super improvement for users and purchasers. The number of samples and the shots required for each model has greatly increased to give a higher level of confidence. There are new requirements for assessing the ballistic protection of front panels of armor models designed for women. The most important change there being a specific buildup of clay backing material behind the armor that represents the female form more realistically, not perfectly, but more realistically. And finally,
Mhm.
there's a new angled shot at the neck edge on the front panel to make sure an actual shot in that area couldn't ricochet and strike a person in their neck. So those are my top 5 things. I do know that Mark Green from the National Institute of Justice is on the call. If he would like to add anything, I will certainly defer to him. Um, if he wanted to put something in the chat, I'm not sure he could speak because he's not a panelist, but um, just you might want to pay attention to the chat to see if he has anything to add. Um, and I'll continue on. I'm going to skip the NIJ stab resistant armor standard because it's really not relevant to the discussion we're having today. And then the ASTM standards noted here for helmets and shields are a step change in terms of the test methods, the test requirements, and the performance requirements. So for helmets, that previous old standard I mentioned was published by NIJ in the early 1980s, and it required only 4 shots on 2 helmet shells. That's it. So only 8 shots, and you could pass or fail the test. The new ASTM standard requires many more samples and shots, assessing penetration resistance and ballistic limit for the helmet shells. And it also has requirements for face shields if they're offered with the helmet. So it completely assesses the shell, the hardware, the helmet, the chin strap, everything. And then for shields, similarly, the previous standard was published by NIJ in the again in the 1980s, and it required 5 shots on what we call a shoot pack, which is just a package that represents the ballistic material layup of the shield's main body. The new standard requires that actual shields be tested with at least 19 shots per test thread, and these shots are taken on the main body of the shield, the edges, the viewport that a person looks through, the interface between the viewport and the main body, the fasteners and the appliques. Like literally every part of that shield is assessed. So that's a nutshell of what's changed. The changes are all good. Um, and for each of these standards that I just talked about, we have a summary for each one. If anybody's really interested in the details and want to know what the changes were from old to new, we'd be happy to provide that. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks, Cassie. Anna, would love to have you talk a little bit about how these products are tested.
Excellent. Thank you, Zach. You can just jump right into the next slide. I'm Anna Seipel. I'm a program director with SEI, which is the Safety Equipment Institute. SEI is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which was founded in 1981. When SEI began, it branched off from a manufacturers trade association because people saw the need for an independent third-party certification body. SEI became an affiliate of ASTM in 2016, and SEI operates a voluntary program which is open to all manufacturers. We have both certification and verification programs, and today we're going to focus on our verification programs. SEI's main goal and mission is to protect end users in both occupational and recreational settings. And you can go to the next slide. SEI is accredited by the ANSI National Accreditation Board to the standard ISO 17065, which is the general requirements for bodies operating product certification systems. SEI undergoes accreditation audits annually, and that confirms that SEI's policies and procedures comply with international standards. Manufacturers participating in our program can be assured that SEI has strict confidentiality and non-disclosure requirements in place. So SEI's programs verify that equipment meets the applicable standards, and there are many accepted processes for conformity assessment, and we're going to talk about 3 of them today. First, we have certification, which involves initial and surveillance product testing, as well as quality management system audits and facility inspections. Certified products are published on a public list, and the certification mark is placed on certified products. Verification, on the other hand, also involves initial and surveillance testing, but it does not require audits or facility inspections. Like certification, though, verified products are published on a publicly available list, and there is a verification mark which is placed on verified products. Then we have supplier declaration of conformity, which is when a manufacturer utilizes a test report to self-declare compliance with the standard. In this case, there's no published product list and no product certification markings. So in some cases, such as with the NFPA, the conformity assessment requirements are written into the standard. In other cases, certification programs exist because of requirements for using federal grant money for purchasing. However, this is not always the case, and for many product categories, there's no universal requirement that a product must meet a standard before bringing it to market. So this is why we're having this conversation and why standards are important, because we want to ensure the quality and consistency of products and help users with product selection. You can go to the next slide. So SEI offers a verification program for various types of law enforcement protective equipment. This includes public order or riot helmets, ballistic shields, ballistic-resistant body armor accessories, pedestrian roadway worker helmets, and metal detectors. And all of these product types are tested and verified to meet ASTM standards. You can go to the next slide. So to talk about how the verification program works, we start with working with the manufacturer to get a signed agreement in place, and we collect a completed application form. We also confirm that the manufacturer has a specific type of product liability insurance in place. Then the manufacturer submits the product for testing to a third-party accredited laboratory. Once they've passed the testing, the manufacturer submits the test report to SCI for verification. Once the verification is completed, we grant use of the verification mark and add the product to the verification product list on the SCI website. And we then roll into annual maintenance, which involves annual surveillance testing, which is typically reduced from initial testing. And the cost associated with participating in the verification program includes an annual participation fee, which is $2,500, and a model fee, which is $300. And then you also have the testing cost. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Zach and Abby.
Thank you, Anna. Moving forward, we have some exciting things on the horizon. I alluded to it earlier. We currently have a new RFP out for the NASPO ValuePoint body armor portfolio. We have incorporated the new standards into that RFP, and we are still allowing right now, while the old standards are still available on the website and allowable for use by NIJ, both sets of standards will be included in this RFP and in the contracts that result from the RFP. That RFP will be closing on Tuesday of next week, and then we'll move into the evaluation phase and have new contracts out in 2025. For more information or to view that solicitation and those documents, please go ahead and visit the Colorado State e-procurement site. We have a link to that on our NASPO ValuePoint solicitation information webpage, which we have linked here. And Zach is going to tell you about RFxPremier.
Thank you, Abby. As we mentioned before at the very beginning of the webinar, this webinar was inspired by the meeting we had with Big City Fire and the identification of some of the unique needs that the fire departments have when it comes to some of these products. So with that, we are looking at issuing a limited use RFP that is targeting those unique needs for the different fire departments to ensure that there is that complete coverage. This is something that is important to us to make sure that all of these first responders have these goods available to them that they can rely on. And that's why we've talked about how important the standards are and how we are incorporating those into these RFPs. So with that, we are going through the evaluation stage early and coming up with what the differences are with the current RFP that Abby mentioned that Colorado is leading, what would change for the limited use fire RFP. And we would hope to have an RFP posted either by the end of the year or by early next year, and hopefully have contracts in the early part of 2025. So as we go through this process, there's a lot that we can do to help share that information. You can always go to our website, rfxpremier.org, or email us at hello@rfxp or rfxpremier.org, and we'll be happy to help provide some of those updates. So how can you purchase or participate from these different contracts? As we mentioned before, ValuePoint has the states as the primary members, and the chief procurement officers can sign a participating addendum off of the current contracts, the current contract that Colorado holds, or they can authorize entities to sign their own PAs. So that's with the contract that is currently available. And when the new contract is available, you'll be able to follow that same process to be able to purchase from that. So how would you purchase? You would make sure that you have access to one of those participating addenda, either at the state level or at your own agency level. As Anne had mentioned, cost. What does all of this cost with different things? We have an admin fee on both the ValuePoint and the RFxPremier contracts. These are some of the lowest in the industry, and these are actually paid by the suppliers off of the total cost or the total sales that are under the contract. These are not something that the agencies pay when they make these purchases off of that. And so ValuePoints is less than 1%. It's typically 1/4 of 1%. So it's the lowest out there. So how can you participate on the ValuePoint contract? Well, buy from the contracts. There are amazing tools and resources that are out there. So a couple points as far as like the fire department and some of their needs. There are currently 12 suppliers with over 400 hard armor products. And there are more than 100 hard armor products with the 10-year warranty that also meet the NIJ compliant products list. And there are carrier options available as well. So we've tried to make sure that some of these needs are fully addressed on the ValuePoint side. And as we look at the RFxP side, when we try to find some of these other needs that aren't currently on that contract, we are focusing on those non-state needs. As we have 3 different ways, we try to make it as easy as possible to purchase from these contracts. So you can either purchase through a participating addendum process if you need to add additional terms, or if you need to negotiate terms off that contract. If you are just ordering products, you can just do that directly through a purchase order, or we have an e-marketplace system that will help integrate into your procurement system or your finance system. So there's a lot of different ways that you can purchase off of those contracts. Like ValuePoint, we have some of those lowest admin fees. It's capped at 1%. It's something that we're doing this for the benefit of the procurement profession. Something as nonprofits, we are really looking at how we can help elevate the procurement profession and all the end users out there to make sure that they get those best value goods and services. So how can you participate in the RFxPremier effort that we have? Well, as we were going forward, we were looking for sourcing team members. If you can help identify what some of those unique needs are that you have that may not be on the ValuePoint contract, we definitely want to make sure that we can incorporate those in and make sure that those get addressed. And with that, we would love to hear from you to hear how we can help address those different needs that we have going forward. So with that, that kind of wraps up what we have. We have time for a couple questions. I see that we may have a couple items in the chat. I'm not sure if those items have all been addressed or if there are questions that we can help identify or address.
Zach, there was one question earlier. Somebody wanted to be reminded of what the standards were. I'm assuming they're talking about the newer standards in the new RFP, but if Paul,
Yes.
if you want to clarify, maybe go back to that slide.
Yep, I will be happy to go back to that slide. Maybe.
I was trying to figure out how to post it in the chat, but it doesn't give me the option to send a message to everyone. So I was like, oh no.
Okay, I believe that these are the new standards that will be on the contract.
And we will be sending out the slide deck to the attendees.
Yes.
Additionally, if I remember correctly, this recording of this webinar will be posted to our YouTube channel as well. So you'll be able to listen to this again as many times as you want. I know it's probably so exciting and you want to listen to it 50 more times, but you will have access to go back to this and re-watch and listen to anything being explained that you want, as well as to these slides in multiple ways.
Another question.
Yes.
What does it mean to be a sourcing team member, and what type of expertise is needed for the sourcing team, and when will the sourcing team begin work?
Great
That
question.
is a great question. Yes. So to be a sourcing team member, this is, as Abby mentioned before, this is where we help formulate the RFP, help input on the scope, what it needs to look like, what those requirements are. We have procurement professionals as well as subject matter experts that we like to have on the sourcing team so that we understand the process and also those technical requirements and those needs. We are looking at trying to get something started later this year. We anticipate that it would be December when we might have the first meetings, or early January at the latest. If this is something that you're interested in, please send us an email at hello@rfxpremier.org. Let us know that you're interested in becoming a sourcing member or have additional questions, and we'll be happy to provide additional information, kind of the tentative schedule that we're looking at.
I'm going to jump in really fast because I'm also going through the chat, and there was a link that got posted by our NASPO R&I moderator. And I just wanted to clarify that that is for the current NASPO ValuePoint body armor portfolio. So if you have any questions about whether or not your state already has a contract for the current portfolio and you want to take a look at what is on that, you can look at that portfolio page. You can also reach out to me, and I'm happy to help walk you through our current portfolio, what we have, who the suppliers are, what entities are allowed to make those purchases. I think Zach shared that we have 247 total PAs on that current portfolio. So we are happy to help navigate any of the website to make sense of any of that to you. I also saw there's a question about whether or not we have an ammunition portfolio, and we do not right now. I think we have talked about it in the past, but that's not something that we've been talking about recently. We are happy to bring that back to our leadership and see if that's something that we should move forward with. So we will take note of that and look into that. Is there training of the body armor included in the RFP? Yes, part of the, well, from NASPO ValuePoint side, and then I'll let Zach speak for RFxP. On the NASPO ValuePoint side, it is not just the purchasing of the items. There is a service component where the suppliers and the distributors have to go out and take measurements of anyone that's needing the body armor to make sure that it is fitting correctly. And then if there is training that is needed on that, they are to provide that to the entity. Zach, I'll let you
Yes,
talk about RFxP.
The new one would have a similar requirement, as we are trying to make sure that the fire department would be able to access comparable services as well. We want to make sure that that would be included as well.
Our last question, it looks like, is there any guidance or documentation available that indicates what levels of protection may be most appropriate for firefighter applications? I'm going to throw this one over to maybe Cassie or Anna.
Yeah.
I'll take that. From the Big City Fire Working Group perspective, they have specifically said they're interested in hard armor, which is rifle protection, and ballistic helmets. I think that's what Mark was asking, Mark Matthews, in terms of level of protection. So it would be probably the new NIJ RF 1 or 2.
Thank you, Cassie.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, thank you all for joining us today. We're excited you were able to spend part of your afternoon with us. If you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out. We have some email information on the screen. I would love to hear from you and be able to help answer any questions or make sure that we get you the information you need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.